Hello everyone, this is Jason from Iron Mission. Thank you so much for being here. I'm not sure if you've heard, but by now, hopefully most of you have, the CEO from Harley Davidson has been fired, let go, retired. Doesn't really matter. The point is he is gone. Now there's been a bunch of videos that have given you that news. What I wanted to do today is talk about how does the new CEO turn Harley around. I've got some opinions, but I bet you do too. And this is where I want you to come in the comments section below. If you were the new CEO of Harley Davidson, what would you do to strengthen the company? Now, there are all kinds of things that have happened, certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, but there's a few that really just didn't make any sense, at least not to me. Thing number one, and I'm going to start out right with some of the more controversial stuff, and that is the RevMax platform. I like the engine. Although it's different from the traditional Harley engines, it doesn't have the sound, but it's got more horsepower. It's totally water-cooled. It's smoother running. I get all of that. What I don't necessarily get is the bikes that the RevMax was put into. And so, for instance, the Pan America I thought was a pretty solid idea, still do. I have a lot of respect for that motorcycle and what it does. There's a lot of innovation there, and I'm glad Harley released that motorcycle. But the other two that have the RevMax engine, I'm not really all that sold on those two. And it turns out most people aren't as well. Now there's this concept in business called the sunk cost fallacy. And that is when you really invest a lot of time and talent and treasure money into a project, it's really hard to let that project go. The new CEO, thankfully, probably won't be as tied into those projects. After all, it wasn't projects that new CEO really oversaw. It wasn't his or her decision. And so now we really have to take a look at, is the Nightster and the Sportster S a motorcycle that resonates with people who buy Harley Davidsons? My answer is no. I don't think that these are good motorcycles for the Harley Davidson lineup simply because they don't have that traditional Harley feel, that traditional Harley sound, and that's what a lot of people want when they buy a Harley Davidson motorcycle. I'm not necessarily saying completely get rid of them, but I guess I'm kind of saying that. I don't really know if the Sportster S or the Nightster has a place long term, and you could see that just by the sales numbers. You walk into any Harley dealer, they might have one or two, but that is certainly not something that they are banking their entire dealership on. In fact, for 2025, the dealers had an opt-out of those RevMax bikes. They're not even American-made anymore, at least currently. They're being made overseas. Now, will they move that production back? We'll see. But I do think that there is an application for that engine. The long-awaited Bronx, the bike that has never been released, and I think Harley has kind of skirted around that. They came out with the Pan America ST, kind of like a light hooligan bike, if you will. The Sportster S was kind of flirting with that idea, but they never actually went through and did the Bronx, and I think that's a huge mistake, and that is what the RevMax engine was for. Now, me personally, I'd love to see a full-fairing sport bike on a Harley just because I think it'd be cool, but I'm not sure that's really going to grow the company all that much. But if it were me, I would probably pull back on the Nightster, the Sportster S, release the Bronx, which is what really caused a lot of excitement. The Pan America could, of course, stay. You know, and I know one of the things that people always say is, oh, Harleys are way too expensive. And I actually addressed that video. I'm going to put it in the upper right-hand corner as well as in the description below, because when you actually compare Harleys to other motorcycles within the class that they sell, the price differences aren't that great. However, that being said, I think for Harley to be ultra competitive, if they could move those prices down by even a 5 or 10% price reduction, that would actually put them on the lower end of the price spectrum within their class, and that makes them highly competitive at that point from a price perspective. Now, there are some new releases, some things that Harley needs to do to generate a little bit more excitement. And I'm sorry, $110,000 bagger, racing bagger, is not going to do it. And so what really I think would be an awesome couple of additions is figure out a way to bring back what I like to call the real Sportster. This would be a true entry-level bike for the beginner that is sub $10,000. That's going to give you the Harley feel, the Harley sound. If you want to water cool that 45-degree V-twin, so be it. I'm willing to make that concession that that's probably something that needs to be done. But what needs to be done is we need a sub $10,000 real Harley Sportster for people who want that true Harley feel. The next thing I think that would generate some level of excitement would be a brand new release of the Harley Softail Deluxe. That is a classic bike, and to this day, they still command a pretty decent amount of money on the used market. It is an awesome looking bike, and if you really wanted to take a step further, I know this would be technically a little bit difficult to do, make it a Springer. I think you'd have a bike that, again, would drive people into the dealerships. And so by adding the old classic Sportster, even with a water-cooled engine, but not the Rev Max, a 45-degree V-twin, that would bring people in that maybe are a little bit younger, that don't have as much money, but want a new bike, that want to get into the brand, and you bring back that Deluxe that is just full-on classic Harley. Another thing to consider would be putting a reverse gear on these big Harley touring motorcycles. You do have an aging demographic, and this might be able to keep them on a larger touring bike and not have to go to the trike for another year, 2 or 3, because moving these big 950-pound bikes backwards, especially if you're on a slight incline or there's a little bit of rocks or something, that could be huge. All right, everybody, so that's just a few ideas. Again, I want to hear from you. What do you think? What is going to get Harley? What does a new CEO have to do to really move Harley forward in the future? And again, if you want to see that video on whether or not Harleys are too expensive, I think I lay out a pretty good case in the upper right-hand corner. And if you're looking for a great deal on how to get a great deal buying your first motorcycle or any motorcycle, check out that video in the lower right-hand corner. Really appreciate you being here. Ride safe. We'll see you next week.